Hello and welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. Unleashed is produced by Umbrex, which connects you with the world's top independent management consultants. I'm here today with Dan Daugherty, who is the CEO of Sounder, and he's going to tell me about their platform. Dan, welcome to the show.
Will, thank you for having me.
So Dan, before we get into what Sounder does, please explain to me the different kind of technology involved in, someone actually being able to listen to a podcast. So, you upload it to a podcast like hosting site, and then there's podcast apps. Maybe there's something in between. So for someone who hasn't started a podcast before, explain to me just kind of how that works.
Yeah, if you look at it in two different types of, one from a listener perspective and then one from a creator perspective. Most of us are listeners throughout the entire world. You might use Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify to actually listen to podcasts on your app. And the way that these podcast apps actually get information is through something called RSS feeds. And every creator that uploads a podcast on a hosting platform like Libsyn or like Sounder or like a host of other hosting platforms, that generates an RSS feed, which allows these apps to then display podcast episodes so listeners can actually listen to them.
Okay, so there's a podcast hosting site and they own the server where the file actually sits, or maybe they're renting it from Amazon Web Services or something, but they're the ones that sort of are owning or renting the actual server where your file is for that podcast. And then when someone goes on Stitcher or Overcast or Spotify or iTunes podcast app or whatever, you think it's there, but it's actually just pulling that file, downloading it from that podcast host.
That is correct.
All right, cool. So what are the, now tell me what Sounder is doing and why someone who's starting a new podcast today might want to think about signing up with Sounder. What are you doing differently than what other podcast hosts do?
Well, if you look at it from the lens of just a podcast creator, there's a lot of different issues that you might experience. One is fragmentation. You have to use a lot of different tools like creation software, like voiceover software. If you want to use something else to monetize, you have to go to different vertical platforms to do that. The second problem for creators is how do you get more listeners to listen to your podcast? Whether or not you have 10 listeners per month or 10 million listeners per month, how do you get discovered? Sounder.fm comes into the picture where we are an end-to-end podcast management platform with a very strong focus on discovery. And again, that's for listeners to discover your podcast, whether you're talking about business or entertainment or sports or whatever that might be. We're seeing a lot more podcasts enter the space. In fact, over 500,000 new podcasts this year alone, of 1.7 million podcasts, which means just like in the early days of the internet, where you had more and more web pages being indexed, discovery became a lot more difficult for search engines to develop algorithms for readers or for searchers to find what they're looking for. And of course, Google democratized access to information. So if you look at what Sounder.fm is doing, we've built technology that offers free hosting for podcast creators. We developed our own in-house transcription services that we offer every single podcast creator free transcription. So essentially what we do is we index the entire audio file, we transcribe it, and then we know precisely where terms or topics or themes are mentioned within the episode. And we do that, we give all of these tools to the creators. So for example, we give every creator their own webpage. That web page has all of their episodes that are indexed or added to our platform. Every episode has their own web page. This helps with audio SEO. Because we offer free transcription, that also helps with audio SEO, as Google can index and crawl now the spoken word in text format. Mm-hmm. And then what really makes us different is the ability to offer every creator have their listeners actually search within their audio. So Will, for example, if you have hundreds of episodes and someone wants to find information every time you mention Google or every time you mentioned AWS or consulting or whatever it might be, we will then send the listener to that precise location to help with engagement. So that is one of the things that are part of our discovery suite, is the ability for in-stream audio search.
Okay. Now that would happen if a host uses Sounder as their hosting site, but then a listener is listening to it via, let's say, Spotify, that listener is not going to get those searching benefits, right?
That is correct.
It's so that listener would have to go to the web page, like the Sounder web page for that episode, to get the searching, capability.
Yeah, one of the tools that we offer all of our creators is the ability to put our advanced player on their website. Mm-hmm. So it could be a WordPress website, it could be a GoDaddy website, whatever it might be. A lot of our creators have their own podcasting section. Yeah. Every single episode has our player. Our player has all of our features really rolled into the player. So in-stream audio search, we offer closed captioning via the transcription. We offer what we call soundbite audio share. So as a listener, if there's a snippet that you really want to share to Twitter or Facebook, you can actually share that snippet. And when a listener clicks on your Twitter post, it will go directly back to your site to that precise location within the audio. So we see a lot of marketing moments happening within a 30 or 60 minute piece of audio. Our tools help creators do that. So that's one way that the listeners would have access to that. Another way is we have APIs for large publishers, as well as we're working with some other platforms that when you're listening on their platform, they'll be able to leverage our technology. So indirectly, they'll be using our technology for in-stream audio search to get the benefit for the creators as well.
Oh, okay. Are you planning on coming out with your own kind of listening app, so people, instead of having to go to a website, could just use the app to listen to a podcast?
Sounder.fm actually, our first release actually last year was solving a major problem that I personally had. I'm in the real estate investing industry, and there's a term called 1031 exchange. And I was on Apple Podcasts and I typed in 1031 exchange. They gave me what they thought were the most relevant pieces of content, but I had to listen about 40 minutes of audio before they talked about 1031 exchanges. Yeah. So that was the first problem. We actually launched last year as a podcast search engine where we indexed all of the world's audio content or podcast content. If you were looking for a specific topic, term, search keyword, whatever it might have been, we sent you to that precise location within that corresponding episode. We then decided to take that technology and really focused on the creator because we saw a very big need and void in the market that we're seeing a lot more content enter the space. Discovery is becoming a major issue. So as of right now, we have no plans to have a more consumer-facing application.
Okay, all right. So this tool is something that you can put on your website for those who want to create a podcast, for the listeners who are going to be, unless the listeners are going to go to a website, which my guess is, like, what percentage of people actually listen to a podcast on a browser page versus, I would imagine it's pretty small, right, compared versus listening on an app.
We're seeing about 75% of all listens come from a mobile device, whether that web-based on mobile or via an app. The rest are on desktop. With COVID and stay at home, we actually saw that go a little higher on desktop. Prior to COVID, it was higher on mobile. It still is high, but a lot of people are listening on their desktop too, just like we're doing today. That is probably going to change here as schools are opening up and so forth. It will go back to about 75% of all streams coming from mobile devices.
Okay, got it. So this tool allows you to have on your website this really very impressive search functionality, which, I mean, even on my own podcast, to be able to find something that I talked about or whatever would be helpful, and does, nice to draw people to your website for that additional functionality. And I suppose it also lets you search like in anybody's, in any podcast to search for those terms, right?
We have that capability, but we only limit to your content. In the future, if you want to open that up, we can do that. We don't do that today. It's just your content that you produced.
All right. And what's the Sounder business model? Are you charging creators, or is it like advertising based? Talk to me about that a little bit.
It's a freemium model where free hosting, free transcription. For those that have more than 20,000 streams a month, they go to our medium package, which is $30 a month. That allows for a lot more functionality, more seats, meaning if you want to invite others within your organization, more streams per month, access to additional data, and so forth. And then we have an enterprise level really account that's dedicated stack for really, really big publishers.
Yeah.
And then the other way that we will be monetizing starting in this quarter is through audio advertising. And we actually want to democratize audio advertising, just like the early days of the internet, where you had the top 1% of publishers could really only monetize with the top 1% of advertisers. Mm-hmm. Very similar here in the podcasting industry. And we want to give everyone the ability, regardless of size, to actually monetize their podcast.
Yeah. I will give a shout out to my son. So I haven't taken any advertisement. That's not really my goal, but my son has a podcast, the Half-Blood Report, and he gets a fair number of listeners. It's all about the world of Percy Jackson. He recently has done some ads on his show. He gets, like multiple hundreds of listens per episode. And I think he made he gets like $2 per episode or something. So
that's right.
It's not big dollars yet, but it for people, for people with smaller podcasts, it is kind of a bit of a bureaucratic hassle to try to accept advertising if that's what you're doing it for. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah. Cool. So by the way, for listeners who are looking for a benchmark, that is a very good deal, to be able to host it for free. Other sites charge, depends on how many episodes you add each month, or how much much bandwidth you want to add each month. But like Libsyn charges either $5, $10, $15, or $20 a month or more, to be able to upload episodes. So it's that makes it more affordable if you're starting when you're starting out to have a free hosting site. Well, that's fantastic. So for people, Dan, where would you point them if they want to learn more?
Just go to sounder.fm. We really break everything out as it relates to our discovery suite. Okay. Even if you're a first-time creator, you don't even have a single episode, you can leverage us. If you already have content and episodes and you're on another hosting provider, what's nice about podcasting and going back to the RSS feed that I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, is you can actually move hosting providers really easily, even if you have hundreds of episodes, because of the RSS feed. So if you're on hosting X, you want to come over to us, you just import all of your stuff within a couple of minutes. All of the audio, metadata, photos, they all come over. And then if you want to move away from us and you're not happy, you just take the RSS feed and import it at a different hosting provider. So it goes back and forth.
Oh, so there's a way to, if you are with another hosting site, you have a way to import all that material.
That's right.
Oh, well, that'd be a big barrier otherwise. So that's good to know. Awesome. Well, it sounds like a pretty good tool for, particularly for people that are starting out or people who are really excited by this search functionality. So check it out. It's what, sounder.fm? Is that right?
FM, that's right.
Sounder.fm. All right. Well, Dan, thanks so much for coming on the show and telling us a bit about this tool that you're building.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate it.
All right.